почему мы вообще такой вопрос сегодня поставили про суперкоманды? Такой термин начинает появляться, и это
This is a term that
сейчас называется команды 2.0.
is getting increasingly used. In another form, it is called Teams 2.0. Technology, AI, and everything we have in our hands changes what is required of teams and of employees. And it seems that previous industrial approaches, such as competences, time spent at work, are no longer relevant. And in many cases, as you will hear today during the panel, are disrupting our system. We had a chat with our panelists just now, and we discussed that if we make our work 9 to 5 with a lunch break and mandatory offline presence, we will end up not in a very good place. I don't want to say the word, but you appreciate. We've got to think about involvement, we've got to think about engagement, we've got to think about employee time, we've got to think about interaction between teams and having cross-functional and mixed teams. We find ourselves in one boat with clients and partners and have to develop our relationships with them. And to top that up, there's AI that starts getting some jobs from teams, and you must have heard about a study by the Harvard Strategy Center. Together with Procter & Gamble, they did measurements how the work of people changes when they work on something together with AI. And it turns out that the least effective teams were when there was just one person without a team. The second to last was a team without AI. The next was one person with AI, and super productive were the teams that leveraged the power of AI as one of their team players. But what I found most curious in that study was another thing, that the quality of relationship was also the best in the teams that were AI-empowered. So the ability to outsource some of the more mundane tasks to the AI helps us build better relations. And all of this is still a gray area. We are yet to understand what are the teams of the future. But we invited here people that somehow managed to do that. We don't know why, but we want to discuss with them and to have a panel with them to understand. And I think it's now the good time to invite Denis.
Я смотрю, сейчас к нам тоже подсаживаются ребята, те, кто сидят
I can see that more people are joining. Those of you who are at the back tables, please feel free to move closer. We have the less populated and the more populated area, so if you are willing to have more communication, you're welcome to join this side. And the first talk we will have with Denis Baranov, the CEO of Positive Technologies. Please put your hands together to Denis. Let's have 3 rounds of applause to Denis. Denis, for you, what day is it? Is it day 4? Okay, let's have a round of applause for Denis.
We
will have a small public talk. I will refer to my questions, to my cheat sheets, and you will have time to ask your questions to Denis. We started talking that today we can see a change in the approach to teams. And when we had a briefing with you, you said that you've had it always. So So it's hard to ask you what has happened in the past, or what has changed in the past 5 or 10 years, because you are different by design, so to say. So I want to ask you as a CEO, what does it mean, or how do you understand that this is a good team and this one is not a good team? Hello, everyone. It's difficult for me to speak early in the morning. I'm not a lark by my type, as most of the IT guys, more of an owl type. And in the past 15 years in Positive and before Positive, I've had an opportunity to experience a lot of things at different teams. But what I think for me is most important in good teams is three things. First is that they are self-powered, so to say, self-motivated. They create their own work and they motivate themselves. Ambition, because the best teams that we had in Positive, and I don't know if you're aware or not, but you can check that we have one of the best rare teams globally, one of the best hacker teams, at least in Russia, and one of the best globally. Will Dima be speaking? Yes, the Dima, our R&D director, will be in the panel. Well, his official title is Chief Hacking Officer. So the second part is about the ambition, because those high performers, they have a lot of ambition. If you want to build the best hacking team or the best product globally, you would find it difficult. The Russian market is small, and it doesn't create the necessary pressure in terms of international exposure. And these guys are really driven. They want to build something that would be recognized internationally, because that's their ambition. And another thing that is the responsibility of the company rather than the team is the degree of freedom that you give. In the past few years and in general, I was the 51st person to join Positive Technologies, and now we have some 2,600, 2,700. At some points we were over 3,000. But the point with smaller teams is that you are everything. You don't have a special marketing manager, you don't have a dedicated engineer, you don't have a dedicated CTO. If something has to be done, you just go and do it. And because of the lack of specialization, that you don't think that I am a developer and you are DevOps, you don't even know the word DevOps. There's a lot of expertise growth in many areas, and the company is getting entrepreneurial. So what is good in entrepreneurial teams? First is this entrepreneurial approach, the drive, and the second thing you wouldn't get unless you give people their area to work on. Well, if you just have a top-down approach by communicating what people have to do, do not expect the people to develop. There has to be a match when a company really gives people some area that would be their own. You do not develop a product, but you develop a business based on a product. So you care about the customer, and you care about this product being the best globally, so that the team was the best, etc. If you can do this, with your team when you are a micro entrepreneur, but of a full-fledged business. And if you grow it to a larger scale, then this is how success probably looks like. Yes, I didn't tell Dennis, but 2 years ago when I studied in Harvard, we had guys from Germany and Spain who were CEOs on CISOs, and they knew you. They knew who Positive Technologies were. So, and they weren't happy about you, which means that probably they saw you as competitors. But I found it exciting even back then that the ambitious goals that were set some 13 years ago, they became the reality. Yes, but the funny thing about the international thing, well, I've traveled a journey from a hacker, a white hat hacker, when you are approached by a bank and they ask you, can you find my vulnerabilities and how can I be breached? So you do your hack, you show them how, and they ask, how do I protect against that? So my competence in the company was about that. We hacked, then clients asked, what do we do? And we didn't know what to offer them. So that's how ideas of a product come. When you break a website and you think of a product that would protect this website, that would filter requests and identify hacker attacks. And when we started doing that back in 2012, we thought that, oh, those Israeli companies or the US F5, they are too far away. There's Gartner Analytics and there's 4 quadrants, and you think that they are the elites, and there's no way for us to get there. But we got there in 2013, and we have been there for 3 years as the only visionary company in website security. As a company that is driven, as a company that really has a hacker mindset. So we never try to develop a successful business through sales. We try to develop our business by creating an excellent product. And suddenly you see that what you thought impossible a couple of years ago, suddenly you are there. And also, we had a great PR guy, Joe Biden. When he implemented sanctions against 2021, everyone learned about us. I think before that, we were just known to competitors, but suddenly everyone knew who we were. There's a saying that always walk the extra mile, because often there wouldn't be anyone else. When you said that we just have the people who want to do great things, who want to do something better than anyone else. Some of my clients in other companies, industrial companies, etc., are like this. But I see that when people leave Positive Technologies, they go to another company to work for a higher salary. And in a couple of years' time, the people lose enthusiasm. What do you do so that people didn't lose enthusiasm? But
вдруг там через 3 года человек расцветает, раскрывается, у него драйв, амбиции, какая-то вот...
do something that a person would flourish in 3 years' time. That suddenly they would...
Не всем это удается. Это классно говорить, но не у всех получается.
Have this enthusiasm even 3 years on. Well, when we fail is when you take a talented entrepreneur and start setting tasks for them, when you deprive them of initiative. And then two things happen. First, that people get used to it. They would say, okay, I have the potential, but then someone else thought for me, and I'll sit quiet and just do my job. Or otherwise people leave because they feel that it's too limiting for them. So this thing about positive, it didn't start with me. The founder of the company, who used to be the CEO, and then I became the CEO. We have a concept which is called a generational company, which essentially means that everyone should bring up their next generation. His task was to bring up the next CEO and step aside, and I was that. And I have the objective to bring up the next CEO. The CTO has to bring up the next CTO, etc. It's like a fractal. So we learn to grow people. So how you grow people? How do you create people?
Для меня вот этот выход все-таки он через полноту задач.
For me, this is through giving people challenging tasks and creating an entrepreneurial mindset. You've got to feel it really. Often when people work with their direct reports, make two mistakes. First is about being thinking for the people. Okay, I've thought for you, I've broken down the tasks for you, etc. So the solution is when you delegate, you don't delegate a task, you delegate a problem. So a problem is not to develop a product. A problem is to create a business. And when you frame the issue like that, you are attracting certain people. Because in Russia and elsewhere, there are not so many places where an entrepreneur can really find the task that would match them. Because normally people would work at the same place for decades, and the system is there, but the system will never create a replacement for the top guy. But we are thinking, what is really the problem that you are solving? And then you start attracting the right people. And the next thing is making sure that you don't exert too much control over people. So often managers would confuse entrepreneurship with administrative management. When you control not the final checkpoint, but the intermediate checkpoints, and you start monitoring the deadlines, the SLAs, the KPIs, etc. So control should be about the final outcome. And often people come to the outcome not in the way that you imagined. When you manage to create an international product, then it's good, and it doesn't matter that we had arguments all the way. But the opposite thing is not to play too much. Because the opposite is also true. When you state a goal, but you don't really make progress towards the goal. That is why we need to measure, at the end of the day, is the business there? And the product that you have created, does it really stop hackers? And you don't want to settle for a compromise when people try to sell you the intermediate steps rather than the final result.
такая толерантность.
And the third thing is what I call environment tolerance.
Вот на самом деле у нас же не все гладко в позитиве, да?
Well, in positive, it's not that
Может быть, даже немножечко такая феодальная компания.
everything is perfect. We are quite a feudal company, so to say, because if you put local entrepreneurs, then everywhere people would have their own management style. So some people really rely on teams, others say that I'm the smartest guy and I will tell you what has to be done. And the second approach brings good results because it is super effective. But this additional task of driving growth is something that you want to ask even those authoritarian guys to do. At one point, in one of our larger teams, what we noticed was that we saw how many coders we have, and in some teams it turns out that among coders there were not too many trained coders. There were some physicists, mathematicians, and people trained in other areas but just learned to code at one point. And then you understand that if a team is like that, you will find it difficult to plant into such an environment, you know, the geek coders that have been so from the university, because the environment would not be tolerant to them. And it is up to the HR and or the team lead to see it. So those who didn't have a degree in coding, we send them to be trained in algorithms, AI, etc. So that we had a different approach. We had a major study of innovators. Some 6 years ago, we did a global study, Facebook and others, and we found that there are 3 motivations for them: to address an important goal, second, the time to market, and third, who am I addressing this problem with?
Да, у нас мы команду хакеров наших пересобирали дважды. То есть у нас был такой эпизод, когда часть
changed our hacker team twice. At some point in time, some of our guys went to work to Kaspersky. Well, we're still on good terms, but they left us. And we had a challenge in one of the teams. When a person comes and they understand that they are the smartest there and they don't have anyone to learn from, and they would leave in a few months' time, I think that a reasonable person would have at least 2 drivers. People like to play from childhood and people like to learn. And if you don't have anyone to learn, I don't think you will stay in the company for a long time. This is IT. IT is about people and IT is about development. We discussed AI yesterday. What do we do with AI security? There's currently no obvious answer. Other that you count on your people, that people are learning new approaches to be ready in the future. So until we set up a stable diet where one person is experienced in one thing, the other person is experienced in something else. Without that, things wouldn't work. So you want to compete. You want to have an environment that stimulates growth. The last but one question. It wasn't in my plan, but it's my favorite question to leaders and CEOs of companies. When I talk about culture and narratives, stories that people tell about the company. So what does it take to grow in positive technologies? What does it take to not get fired from positive technologies? Well, people explain all of those things to themselves somehow. And this is the culture that exists in the business. So I have a question about this narrative. What do you want your people to share about your company in a bar to their friends? So what would you like your guys to say about positive technologies when they spoke to someone informally in a bar? Well, it's a good question. And often we say what we as leaders want, because often we say one thing, but we want people to say other things. For example, you say that you would have a stable salary, but I don't want people who work in positive technologies say in a bar that we have a very stable salary. So what do you want them to say? I think I want them to say that they were able to find self-fulfillment. I think it is the self-fulfillment and the giving people enough space where people can come, make mistakes, but still attain self-fulfillment in whatever area that they would like to within the company. And my final favorite question. You said that it's important for you to grow new leaders internally, that you look for new future leaders from within rather than from outside. But what do you think makes you a super leader? What do you think is your superpower as a CEO?
Ну, я на самом деле достаточно глубоко копаю, если честно, да, потому что, ну, все-таки образование в области прикладной математики накладывает.
I tend to think quite deeply because my first degree is in applied mathematics. So I.
Ну, то есть вот чуть-чуть, может быть, дам контекста, да, вокруг.
I dig deeply.
Мне что хочется? Мне хочется немножечко так в компании несколько параллельных генеральных директоров, да,
My idea is to bring up
такой вот прям бизнесово-коммерческой логики немного.
A few CEO candidates and to have a holding with a group of companies.
Ну вот есть там направление продуктовое у нас сетевое, да, то есть если мы смотрим.
Say we have this network business, if we can bring up a CEO of the network business
прям приложений кода, да, то есть потенциально для меня я вижу в этом возможность
safe applications.
Ниши для роста до потенциального гендира, человека, который работает в данной нише. Вот, я уже забыл, на какой вопрос, если честно, отвечать.
I think that it's about creating the space for a potential CEO to develop.
Мне кажется, что у нас есть все шансы, что у нас и у меня в частности получится.
And I think that
как-то вот
there's every probability that we'll succeed.
Получалось создавать такие компании.
I have seen that. I have experienced that I can create companies that attract the right people. So I hope that this is my superpower. Thank you very much. I saw that many people were taking notes. Please raise your hands if you found this talk valuable, and let's have a round of applause to Dennis. Okay, we will now do a bit of a reshuffle. Guys, we have some seats here in this part of the room. Please take a couple of minutes. We will now rearrange the room a little bit. We will need more chairs here on the stage. And meanwhile, I want to ask Okay. Okay. Thank you for cleaning the floor here. Let's put our hands for those who help us. Okay, I'm Elena Chernikova, and I will moderate this next part. And I'm now inviting the panelists. And I will start with Aynura Kashoeva, VP for HR and Development of PC Aquarius and the Managing Partner of Reinvention Academy. Please. Vladimir Konoplev, CTO of T-Bank. Have you seen the booth that T-Bank has here at Positive Technologies? Please check it if you haven't seen it yet. Maria Rivinska, head of Ultima at Yandex.Go. She also has a Telegram channel that we are subscribed and suggest that you subscribe to. Dmitry Serebrennikov, and he is the Chief Hacking Officer, as I was told. And finally, Valentin Gubarev. I'm sorry, he's from Krok. Well, this is my
Я подсматриваю,
weakness.
подсказываю, но все равно ошибаюсь почему-то.
I often
Валентин, тоже аплодисменты.
check up my cheat sheets, but still I confuse names. Apologies.
И мы поговорим о командах, о том,
And we'll talk about
что,
teams.
собственно говоря, происходит с командой. Как вы на это сейчас смотрите?
What happens? What is happening with teams? What's your view of that? How your teams were able to achieve good results? What were the success factors? And often they keep they refer to each other, saying, in this company or that company. So it's a great honor for us to have you here. My first question, can you please answer, saying a few words about what you expect of a team? What is it that you look at? In Inforce, where I come from, for example, last year we did experiments and we found that an important quality was optimism, and in particular technology optimism, when people are not afraid of new technology, rather they embrace it. And we know that if people believe that technology is great, they would be better at dealing with technology. But in our experiments, we calculated that the difference was by a factor of 4.5, and that's a big number. If optimism results in people being 4.5 more effective, that's a good thing for the business. So we believe that optimism is a good quality of teams. So what is your view? I know. Well, given the world that we exist in today, for me, the definition of a super team is when a team has energy, when their energy potential is bigger than the energy potential of the leader. That's number one. And number two, the level of humor in a company, when they can make fun of themselves, and I'm not talking about toxic relationship. So you can be professionally competent and still have humor. Yes, I would also add openness. There are traditional companies, red companies, when there's the boss, there's the table, and there's you. Well, this thing doesn't exist. It's important to have an environment in the team where it's okay to say, sorry, I didn't understand anything, can you please repeat? And people wouldn't shame you. Or you can share your idea that could be quite absurd, but still no one would shame you. When there's safety in the team and a shared vibe, when it's comfortable to work in, it's very important, because without without that, you wouldn't have proper interaction in the team.
Я как в той игре. Помните, повтори, что предсказали предыдущие два спикера.
I feel like in a game where you want to repeat what the other speakers said and then add something of my own. I do agree about the energy. I think that when a team is bright, it is great.
Я полностью поддерживаю, что
I totally agree that corporate culture, at least in my bubble, is changing towards a more open one. And so people would shame the people who are trying to be toxic.
Как будто бы очевидная вещь, но мне кажется, очень важно это адаптивность.
Another thing that I would like to add, quite obvious but still very important, is the ability to adapt. Things change from external factors, macroeconomic, etc., and technologies that have become part of our lives so rapidly. So I think the ability to adapt and the speed that we can sustain without being destroyed by it, it's important.
Я поддержу тезис про юмор.
I support humor. I think it's important in teams. Sometimes I make a presentation and before I finish, my guys start sending me memes with me. I hope no one is listening from my team. Otherwise, they would start doing more of that. I do support humor, but what I think is the most important in a team is to have enthusiasm, to have bright eyes. It's better to have a junior, but who really has bright eyes, who's enthusiastic about what they do and working day and night, than a seasoned professional, but who's tired and doesn't want to work and really looking for their retirements to come. Okay, Valentin. You have the challenging task of coming last.
На самобеглость я точно смотрю.
No, I certainly agree with what others said. Also, I think what's important is self-motivation. When people are self-driven, when they come to work, they know the reason why they came to work. They know what they want to do. You just look how this organism is growing and you help it grow. I support
скорее такая просто дружелюбная.
Humor.
Я вижу команды, которые прям дружат, которые сплоченные, по ним это видно.
But I can see teams who are really friends, who are closely knit, and you can see that. And they have humor, they have shared hobbies, they have all that.
Ты хочешь ходить на работу.
It's about you wanting to go to work where you have fun. You spend a lot of your life there, after all. And if you have ambitious goals, you would spend even more time at work. So it's important to have the right atmosphere. And what do you think? I want to ask you and Vladimir. We talked about this a little bit while we briefed. When you manage not just multiple teams, but when it's thousands of people, you change your approach a little bit. So what is it that you discontinue doing? What stopped being effective? When we build large teams, it is now popular to build some product verticals, to build teams around products about some purpose rather than some function. So when you build such large structures, you would have some top people who have their own large area of responsibility, and for you, they're still part of the team, and you want them to play as a team. In a couple of years, I've taken quite a long journey with my top team at T-Bank. And I think what worked the best, at least that's what I believe, is to have dual responsibility for strategic bets. We set up a strategic session and describe strategic bets, and we
Это вообще классная история.
make two people responsible for each strategic bet.
Механик совместных у ребят старался рождать, там, не знаю, если говорить про какие-то наши регулярные синки.
And I try to develop mechanics like this.
Ежемесячная смена фасилитатора.
We talk about our radio sync events, for example, that's rotating the role of facilitator so that everyone had an opportunity to feel how a facilitator feels.
Не кринжовые какие-то сильные.
And team building done right, not in the cringe way.
Да. Вот не
Not the rope climbing,
в темноте, можете себе
but
представить.
a cool idea is a dialogue in the darkness. I don't want to spoil on that. You're welcome to find out about it.
Позволяют тебе как-то проще.
Other mechanics that help you
Не знаю, у нас вот супер взлетел
better
с кружочками в Телеграме.
communicate in a team. For example,
Стендаперов российских.
a Telegram channel with round videos is what worked well for us. And we took it from Russian stand-up comedians who first implemented such a practice. Well, I must admit that I've never seen so much emotion and so much involvement and engagement. So,
Быстрые коммуникации с
using mechanics like that through non-standard communications, leveraging emotion,
сплоченную команду.
so this helps create a closely knit team, even out of big managers. I remember that we were preparing a strategic session for a major company, and there were product directors and general directors, and before that they had a strategic session. So as we were preparing for this, we interviewed them, and they said that the previous strat session, whether they went on rafts in a boat, they said that it was a great event. And we thought of doing something like that, but another person said that I don't want to have another physical exercise strategic session. And the challenge is that teams are different, they have different tastes. And today it becomes more challenging than previously to do team building with such teams. Valentin, what's your view? What is it that you do away or what you change recently? Well, the first team that I had was around 147 people, and I found it quite easy. 147 people is the number that you can keep in your head. At least I had the capability of thinking of everyone. But when it became 500 plus, you can't keep it in your head at the level that you want. And that's where all the processes change. You cannot interview all the people who join your team. You can't even meet all the people who work in your team. You can meet once a quarter with the top 100 who made it to the top this quarter. So it's a very different process. And I had to let many things go. I had to delegate many things to my subordinates. And I have a core team of 20 people, heads of business units, on the technical side and on the business side. And I understood that my task was to build a team out of them, and that is a different task. Dennis spoke about some degree of feudalism. With us, the autonomy of leaders is also quite high, and it's impossible to make them live by one set of rules. In fact, we do support a culture of individualism, and you are free to do whatever you want. But then the structure becomes siloed, and you get different countries, if you will, but you want these countries to be on friendly terms. No shared motivation can make people to be on friendly terms, but shared goals, shared tasks is what can do that. And also, team building is what helps. When you have all people in one room, when you get people in one room, there would be a mixing of cultures. They would cross-pollinate with memes, etc. But you can't do it with top people. But I took my top people a couple of times to Krasnaya Polyana in Sochi, and there are formats such as a co-working space high in the mountains, and there we worked for 1 week from one room, for example. That's one example. And also, we leverage other formats which are about reflecting. Last year, we found the Harvard Negotiation School that has a lot of business simulations, such as allocating company shares or trading oil. And I asked my core team to play some of these for 3 days, and we learned quite a lot about ourselves. Okay, and I want to ask my next question.
На твоем уровне, когда у нас уже команда лидеров, он очень часто возникает, что
which often arises at this level when you have a team of leaders, that at this level you've got very strong, very powerful people, big managers. But what we need in the business is a super team. It's like in football or research or healthcare, that we find great people who still don't live up to the task. And I remember the story of the Wright brothers. They had workers who worked on a cornfield and made the airplane after working hours. And there was a French person whose name I forget, who had the best people and the government funding, and they failed, while the Wright brothers succeeded. So what do you do to build a super team of leaders other than team building efforts?
На самом деле, я это с двух уровней
Okay, I see two levels in this question. First is my core team, where I am a moderator, a facilitator, and I can influence everything.
Для меня очень важно это индивидуальные разговоры с каждым.
It is very important for me to have individual chats, one-on-one conversations with people.
Больше уже на какие-то сессии терапии там местами.
My people tell me that often it is a little bit like therapy sessions. But to grow people, you need to go deeply into their motivation and what's really going on with them or what's not going on with them, and help them. Secondly, as the overall moderator of this process, I can see if someone stands out and breaks the team spirit. When someone acted toxically, when someone put his goals above those of their neighbor, and I can interfere. And it's important to work with the energy of these leaders. So the higher the top manager is, the more level of impact they have. Looking at the board of directors, in our company, that is the biggest level of influence, because the energy of the people would be important for the energy of the person would be important for teams of 200, 500 people. So it's important to understand what's happening with the energy of people and to learn how to talk to them. And in the past couple of years, we started fine-tuning our board of directors. And it's not that I'm the top guy, because there's the founder there, but I'm one of the top guys. And I can see the dynamic between them. And you have a good feel for your team that reports to you, but you don't have enough understanding of the people who are with you laterally. And so
На самом деле разговариваем мы
a big question mark is always what do we talk about? And we talk about things that are classic for a relationship, I think. Talking about the common goals and how we see the future of the company, how everyone sees their contribution, and importantly, what the people are mostly motivated by. And then it turns out that people are very different, and you've got to uncover that and moderate that so that all the pieces of the puzzle got together and the people were aligned. And secondly, to really bring to light where you're not content with others. It's important to discuss the tensions, the frictions. Then this makes the atmosphere much better. And in the past couple of years, the atmosphere and the effectiveness of the board of directors grew much better when we started investing in that. Great. My next question I wanted to ask of Dmitry. And Denis has already told us how you hire best of the best, you hire the best talents, and everyone wants talents. Good people, bright people. And my question is, what do you do to recruit them, to bring them in? And what do you do for the people to uncover their talent in a team? How do you take such bright people driven by their own agenda and unite them in a group of people that goes after a common goal? Well, I think every team has a spirit. If you have it, well, it's difficult at the beginning. When you've got to build a team, then it's difficult to create some principles for it. But if you have a team, if it has been around for a number of years, well, a person is a social animal, and when they get in an environment, they start taking in what's in that environment. They see, they look at the habits of the other people, how they work, and if a person has ambitions, that's a perfect match. Our profession is a very honest one. A hacker is when you do something and the result is very visible. Well, people work on the same project and you can see who found more vulnerabilities, whose performance is better. So you cannot sit still and just be silent. And people have a competition that I want to be better than my neighbor. I want to find more bugs, vulnerabilities. And as you develop, you've got to learn, but you've got to learn from the best. So when you think, where do I go? You don't have the choice. You look at the people who speak at technical conferences. We have the offensive track here. And if you didn't have a chance to visit this Positive Lab, where we show some hardcore hacker things. And when you think of where I want to go to learn from such people, then you know that you have your specific features, but you want to tune them down if you want to work with these people and to interact with this team. It's like in football. If you have a lot of stars, but they don't have a common goal, and all they want to do is to show off, you wouldn't get a very good result. How do you, as a manager, as a leader, balance between ambitious and driven, talented people? And by the way, footballists also want to score as many goals as possible. And synergy, cross-functional interaction. How do you find the right temperature here? And what do you do to regulate it? Well, the goal is common for everyone. Everyone wants to be the best. The goal is that our team should be the best hacker team. And it's a common goal. If someone doesn't share this goal, if they just want to sit and work from 10 to a certain 1 hour in the evening and then to go home, then they wouldn't fit. And if a person is really driven, if they want to prove that we are the best team, they would fit. So I'm for engagement. I think that a person maybe even less qualified will address that, will teach them what they need to know, rather than them being seasoned professionals but not really wanting to do things. I remember my dialogue with Anna Rimskaya, who came up with an idea of this panel. When we had a briefing, I learned a few things about how you build the environment so that it was comfortable for the talents that you have. So I wanted to ask you to share a few practices about how you changed the habitual approaches to business processes so that the best hackers were willing to work with you. Well, we work for results. We don't. What counts is not time. Well, if people want to work at night, hackers often work at night. It's good because the security would often, corporate security would often go to sleep. And maybe that's culture, the cultural stereotype that hackers are night creatures. Well, if they start working at 5 p.m., that's okay, as long as they deliver results. And age is not very important. We have someone 15 years of age. It's challenging because the current legislation doesn't allow us to give him a full-time job. But we've got to coordinate a lot of things with his school, etc. They will turn 16 soon, and it's going to be tough. And right now, I'm talking to a 17-year-old guy. He's now solving his test. But you've got to create an environment for an individual where they will be able to uncover their potential. And we don't have the bureaucracy of, asking them to come to office at certain hours, because how do you impose structure on a creative person? When you deliver the results, it's okay. No. If you have some product that you build, well, it takes a certain structure. But if you've got to go and hack something, it is only possible in a free environment. Thank you. I think it is very important. Last time, I took with me the story of starting the working day at 5 p.m. And this time around, I'll take with myself the story of the 15-year-old guy. I remember that there was a school guy who's doing his internship with me, and at one point in time I needed him, but he said that I can't be with you this day because I will have a test in biology. Masha, your product magically emerged in Yandex, and while you are with the company, you always come up with new things, new ideas, new markets. And the question that I wanted to ask of you is how you keep this super team for a long period of time. You can put it together and you can get a peak performance, but it's difficult to maintain them for many years. So what do you do to maintain the bar high for a long time? You said that they organized together, and I sort of had a reaction because it really took a lot of effort for that to happen. I agree that sparkling eyes are important, and it's important that it matters to people. When people only have financial motivation and not driven by the product, it's difficult to work work with such people. I think that when you engage the team actively in planning, when you ask them to think together with you about the next challenge and why it's going to be great and how it's going to change the lives of many people. The product that we work with, in our team, a big driver is that our product is used by thousands. So when we do something right, thousands of people are happy. When something breaks, thousands of people are unhappy. And this inspires a lot. In summer, for example, we'll have a major launch in another country. That was initially my idea, and I came up with it, and I asked, what if we? And they sat down and they thought this idea through. And now this is happening. There are some projects, or rather, I think that I have quite a mature team. I think it's a particular feature of a corporation that I mostly work with leads, team leads that have their own teams. And the leads, for them to work in the long run and motivate their teams, what matters is being part of the picture. And in addition to that, they should have some healthy competition. And you want to give them the next challenge at the right time. Okay, we have almost done this. What will we do next? And yes, therapy conversations about their motivation, because some are driven by building the right processes for a long time. Others are driven by launches. So it's important to understand who's driven by what. If I remember right, you are preparing or you already have finished a course for leaders about working with teams. Do you think that these skills of creating such an environment, is it possible to teach those, or is it possible to get trained in those, or does it only come with practice or intuition? Well, as a person who studied in many places from Stanford to Harvard, you would know that you can get tools and it's up to you whether you implement it or not. So we have put together a checklist of tools, and you can tell a person that in a situation A you can use this tool, in a situation B you can use this tool. I didn't invent something new. I just read books and I put certain things together and I say, okay, it helps me and maybe it will help you as well.
Применять, то есть кто-то живет и без этих коучинговых всяких инструментов.
But others live without those coaching tools and things work well. Others live without therapy sessions and they do work well too. I do rely on some Harvard and Stanford practices, and I understand that I work in a corporation, and it's important that there was some streamlined approach, that everyone was transparent. For those who work in startups, it may not be that important because you have smaller teams and the motivation works differently. So it's different in every case. Thank you. Vladimir, a question to you regarding the challenges of managing teams of teams. Invariably, you come to a situation when people start thinking in their silos, and it's difficult to achieve shared participation. Shared solutions. I remember working with aerospace, and we spoke to them, and they are very polite, and we've been talking to them for an hour, and they said, thank you, but it doesn't apply to us, because when Israel or India send an astronaut into space, we don't do MBTI, we don't do testing. There's an individual who is our biggest bet, or a couple of people, and it's up to them to become a team. They have their goals and objectives, but becoming a team is up to them. And we found it quite curious, and we studied it later, that even teams without a shared culture can be a good team. So, how does it work with you? How do you overcome barriers and you bring people together? Well, I'm having a déjà vu. I said a few words at the start, and I can hardly add anything to that. Well, perhaps, what are your don'ts? What you don't want to do to
Ну, давайте с такой стороны зайду, что
disrupt that environment?
как у руководителя
Okay.
я на каком-то этапе своего
As a manager, as a leader,
кто такой руководитель, у меня сейчас
I have my own concept of what a leader is, and currently my motto is that people shouldn't need me. I'm trying to do as much as I can not to stand in the way of team. So my don't would be don't stand in the way, don't interfere. And I think in the previous talk, and now we have been talking about control freaks, about purposeless bureaucracy, about lack of freedom. So to summarize, it is not to stand in the way, not to interfere. And then the guys would find a way to agree, given that they have a common goal. So you steer them, you talk to them, but it's important not to stand in the way. We know about your team. In general, you are seen as people who work a lot, who invest a lot in the development of the business. T-Bank, I believe, has been successful in overcoming multiple difficult crises. And the guys turn out to be very resilient. Do you have an idea what helps your team to be resilient, not to give up when you get so much change? Well, I think we have had an answer. It's about the sparkling eyes. Yes, we work a lot. We are a hard-working culture. We like to work. We like to invest to a maximum to get the maximum outcome. But you can't do that with a stick. It's about sparkling eyes. It's about the desire to do more, to walk the extra mile. When I became a manager first, or when I thought about it first, I heard at one of the panels that if you're an engineer and you don't have the time to do what you want, to do all that you want, you go and become a leader. And now I want to ask Ainura. I have known her in a number of companies, and this is the fourth company that I know her working. And in every business where she worked, there was a major leap and a major transformation. And I know that now you look a lot into reinventing yourself and managing the process. And for us, today is pretty much the new normal. Well, if 5 years ago we spoke about innovation as something that happens from time to time, like a nice thing to have, it's nice to have innovations, etc. But today it is essentially the necessary requirements. So if you can't change, then you wouldn't be able to survive other than a couple of years in the market. So what do you think makes super teams in a constantly changing environment? Thank you. As for reinventing myself, I continue to be a human, I continue to be a woman, a mother of three, but I have my own positioning. I position myself as a global nomad woman, and at this point in time I find myself in Moscow, Russia. People ask a lot, how do teams in a stable world 10 or 20 years ago versus the expectations of the super teams today, when everything is changing, everything is fluid. And as a manager partner of the Reinvention Academy, which is exactly about building anew, the information is as follows. From 1988 until now, there have been 469 economic crises. And the recent data on the uncertainty index that the Davos Forum establishes annually, well, currently it stands at 400%. So it's difficult to plan, and we can't, as leaders, control things. But we still must deliver on OKRs, KPIs. Some still have it. So my observation would be that certainly in the current setup of the world and in the industry where I am today, which is IT and IT hardware, super teams will be super teams when they will be able to rearrange themselves. What that means is that currently it's not fashionable to have large vertical teams with a lot of layers. Rather, it is good to have cross-functional teams that address a particular task, and then they rearrange, and perhaps they will have to get together again at some point in time because a product has become obsolete. Sometimes we fall in love so much with our products and services that given the speed, and the speed is becoming even faster with AI now, we find ourselves in what we call it Titanic syndrome, when you're afraid of letting go of the past as the past experience. And the product that you have fallen in love with, you have invested so much in it that you find it difficult to let it go. And we have even rituals when we have official burial rituals of products and projects. It's about being honest with yourself as a leader when you say that, okay, it was good once, but now it's time to move on. And it's important to rearrange people. If you have those great people with sparkling eyes, you can take them elsewhere to assign them to other teams where there's not enough of sparkling eyes. And those who feel tired, perhaps it's a time for an honest conversation and find a career track elsewhere in an organization or outside the organization. So in a world of constant change, we are afraid of changing ourselves and changing our teams. And another key thing that I notice is that we as leaders are afraid to renegotiate. I don't like the word rules. If we talk about innovation culture, it's rather about agreements, negotiations, because adult people negotiate, because the rules are set by the boss, so to say, and the boss is the smartest person in the room. Well, this is not the case today. And then we've got to sit down and talk, and it's about honesty, something I spoke about. And the third thing that follows from it is that the role and expectations of the leader have evolved. If previously the expectation of the leader was that from the point of view of hard skills and soft skills, they would be the smartest person in the room and they took that responsibility, then today I see, and it's corroborated by data, that what matters is the level of energy. It doesn't matter whether he has the skills or not. What is important is the level of vitality. And we'll teach them the necessary skills. So what's expected of the leader is not the success or background over his 2 or 3 decades, but how much they will be able to sustain the level of uncertainty in a team. There was an experiment even. a problem was given to children and leaders, and the problem was about uncertainty. And how many minutes do you think the leaders could survive in uncertainty? And what about children? Well, let's ask the room. Okay, who thinks that the leaders could survive for more than 2 minutes? Yes, of course, children. Children have fun with uncertainty. It's just that something happens with us during our upbringing, during our school or university education, that we are struggling with uncertainty. We immediately want to turn the uncertainty into certainty. We want to formulate KPIs. We want to start giving the right answers that may not be right because they are based on my yesterday's experience, which may be no longer relevant. So it's about creating a space.
Могут между собой взаимодействовать и предложить лучшие решения.
It's about
задавать интересные вопросы.
Coming up with better solutions. And your role is not to interfere and to stretch their worldview and to just believe in your team. And I think that would be a good final word, but we still have something to discuss. I know you are the only HR in the panel, so you will have to bear with me for a while. Recently, I had a challenging conversation. We talked to HR of a client, and they said that we need an employee assessment system. And we suggested, well, go ask your leaders what is it that they want. And they said, no, we don't want to do that. And we asked them, okay, how would you go about it? Well, we'll invent a system whereby early in the year we set goals for the employee, then at the end of the year we analyze, and then we see whether the person has made progress or not. And when we invent that, we'll go to our leaders and then sell it to the leaders. And we ask, well, what's happening with the leaders? And they say, well, with leaders, the goals and objectives change quite often, every 3 months. So the goals set early in the year may not be relevant at the end of the year. And this was a very enlightening conversation for me, that the role of the support functions is also evolving fast. So I have a question to you. For those in our audience who's from HR, what do you think changes for HR? What we should pay attention to remain relevant and effective? And can we build super teams laterally, so to say, not by leaders, but by us, or is it an illusion? Thank you for your question.
Обращение к HR, и на самом деле не только к HR, взаимодействие с HR. Да, точно, если мы говорим о том, что мир уже точно изменился, и уже 400...
Say something for the HR people. Well, if the world has changed and we have 400% of uncertainty and 200% of disruption, so question becomes, who is an HR? In organizations where I work, I tell people that we are not a personnel function, we are not HR, but we call ourselves the people function or whatever, because from how we call ourselves determines what the function is going to be. If it's firing and hiring and comps and bans and things like that, then it's one thing, but it could be more than that. Especially post-COVID, HR is certainly not a service function. And now I want to call upon HR people. It is your responsibility to formulate how you would be perceived in an organization. In my paradigm, HR is certainly strategic strategic function because we are responsible for the people and the performance in an organization. And
Изменения начинаются с тебя. Вот как мне кажется, пока
there
HR будет
could be
двигаться
many tools for that. So while HR continue to use old school approaches, functional approaches, siloed approaches, things wouldn't change. But I love products approach in HR. I implemented Kanban in 3 companies, and even when I walk away, the company continues to practice that. I say that I'm a lazy manager. People would pull the tasks, the cards with tasks themselves. My task is to set ambition. You're welcome to go to demo days. You're welcome to go to sprint reviews. You're welcome to go to other teams, and that's all you need. I'm often invited when there's a transformation, and for a transformation, you've got to change mindset, and we go about customer centricity, product approach, agile, etc. So I believe that you want to just go and peep into what the business does. So if some new technology is implemented in the business, the HR would have to lead that, because when they pilot that, they would then be in a position to help other teams. So that's a product approach. Secondly, when you start with yourselves, you can't sit in your just HR domain. You've got to go to marketing, you've got to go and talk to the CTO, you've got to go to finance to ask for a financial allocation. So I'm a strong believer in working in dyads, and so that the other person will challenge you because they have experience from another function. And also, I'm saying that I'm not your client. You don't need to coordinate things with me. Your client is out there. If you want to test something, if you want to do A/B testing, you go and ask them, don't go and ask me. And number 3, we don't work for the user, but we work together with the user. And that's when people have a paradigm shift. And I tell them, you can develop a motivation program not by desktop work, but by working together with the people who need it. You develop it and you pilot it. In a couple of months' time, you can see the difference between the team who implemented it and the team that didn't. Thank you. I tried to avoid this question, and I tried to negotiate it with myself, but still I'm very curious. Today, there's a lot of thinking about how AI changes teams, and by the way, the term super teams comes or has evolved from the term super employee, and a super employee is someone who works, who leverages AI. So super teams are teams that also leverage AI. And do you have an answer? Do you have any ideas about how AI changes the work of teams, if at all? Perhaps we need any new qualities or competences. Do you have an idea? Okay, let me start from what I observe in myself. When we are in a meeting with other top guys and we understand that we don't have a number of a particular market metric, but we want some benchmark right now, and it would be good to have it in a minute's time. And I see myself and others go into DeepSeek or Perplexity, and you have the information on the table. Yes, you have to validate it, that's true, but it helps move the conversation forward. And I come to see it more and more often. And there are some more specialized solutions in IT and elsewhere, a co-pilot of sorts. But in Teams, I can see things like that. Quickly finding information that would have the conversation move forward, that would help negotiations move forward. that's what's happening more and more, and that's great.
Я хочу еще мы с Дмитрием обсуждали, да?
We had a conversation with Dmitry, and I asked
Потому что у меня есть очень
about
искусственный
the people and technology. I have an observation that AI is still seen as a calculator, as an aid. Like, we would have solved this task anyway, but it took us longer. Now it takes us less time. But there's another paradigm. I look at my younger son, and he's friends with Alisa assistants, and they are friends, and Alisa almost has a personality. It's not just a calculator, not just an aid. He teaches Alisa to tell stories, etc. There's almost some social interaction. And I can see it in adult people as well, when people assign a personality to an AI that it doesn't have. And what's your view, Dmitry? Do you have a pragmatic approach to it, or do you think that it could be a super employee? Well, I'm a strong supporter of AI and neural networks. This speeds up work so much. Asking a question and getting an answer without Googling for it. And if you can ask good questions, and if you're a professional, you can get answers that you would use in your work, and the performance of an individual grows substantially. We had a case, one of our hackers talked to ChatGPT. ChatGPT suggested some attack vectors, and he found vulnerabilities in Apple Safari and Google Chrome, and he reported it to the vendors and got $28,000 under their bug bounty programs. So I suggest that you use it, but you don't assign a personality to it.
Не думаю, что когда-то это заменит прям целиком сотрудника.
I don't think that at any point in time it would replace
перепроверять, они там галлюционируют.
An employee.
Simply нельзя же бухнуть.
Because sometimes they hallucinate, and you've got to double check what they give you. Well, and you can't go and have a drink with AI. And if not, then how do you build a relationship with it? Well, building a relationship with a machine sounds like a transhumanism. I don't know, maybe when Elon Musk plants chips into everyone, maybe then time would come. But I don't want to say that it's ever going to be an employee. A helper, yes, but I don't want to make them animate.
Добавьте что-то, нет?
Мне вот такая история вспомнилась. Какое-то время я несколько лет проработал трекером
For a few years, I worked as a tracker of product teams of startups with some 40 or 50 teams.
И там был очень интересный момент о том, как менялись фаундеры. Состояние, что они что-то не знают про свой бизнес.
There was an interesting evolution of founders from not knowing a lot about their business to knowing everything about their business. And there it was important for the founder to acknowledge themselves that they don't know something and to ask the right question. And if you ask the right question, you can go to Google and simply Google it, and you would get all the right answers of what you need to do in your business. And maybe it's because of your background. If you have been developing products for your whole professional life and you didn't do sales, if you ask the right question, you will be able to get all the necessary answers. I think that the effect of the AI is that for a founder it is
А как бы у искусственного интеллекта как бы нет.
Not good for them to go and Google. And then AI, less so. Well, it's intelligence, even though artificial. So I think that this effect really accelerates the change.
Еще один собеседник за столом, которого чего угодно можешь спросить.
You know that you have yet another
вопрос в том, что он
participants of a conversation at the table who is quite knowledgeable. Google is also quite knowledgeable, but it is perceived differently. And by the way, no one said that AI generates quite good memes, so we can take humor as a starting point. Yes, and during the previous talk with Dennis, we discussed that the presence of AI in communications makes us more empathic, makes us more sensitive, makes us softer in communications. I recall Xi'an, the Russian real estate platform. When I was looking for an apartment recently, there's a button, view this option, and you hit it, and Xi'an writes an email to the apartment owner. Good afternoon, I'm interested in this offer. If it is still available, can I appoint a meeting with you? And I liked how I came across as a very polite individual when the AI was doing this for me. So, and I have a question. Will I not at one point lose the ability to formulate it myself? Wouldn't I depend on AI to even act socially? Well, that's a philosophical question. We have very little time, and I have this favorite question that I ask of leaders. And all the five of you are great leaders, and it's great to observe what you do in a company and with the company, how they evolve under your leadership. And I have a question about your leader superpower. What do you think you do great? Why do you think you are able to implement this transformation? Why do you think you can build such teams? And what is it that you value in yourselves as leaders? Ainur, let's start with you. Let's just follow the order in which you're seated. Well, while you were asking this question, I was trying to recall what feedback I get. It's energy and the level of LQ. Does everyone know what LQ is? Well, there's LQ, there's EQ, and there's LQ, which is love Q. I think I'm okay with this. Okay, and what does it give you? Why do you think this matters with teams? Well, I think that when a team sees that your leader has integrity and they emit creative rather than destructive energy, it is a very powerful supporting force that uncovers hidden talents. Thank you, Vladimir. I'll repeat what I said previously, perhaps dwell a little bit on that. I think I'm good at not interfering, of not standing in the way of the team.
Как работают руководители в компаниях, строил комьюнити, профессии.
Looked quite a lot in how leaders operate. And I have often seen cases about toxic management and all that stuff, which creates a treadmill environment in a team. And the people are in a particular life situation and they can't leave the job, although they pretty much want to. So I think I learned not to stand in the way, not just being passive and do nothing, but rather to let go, while at the same time to be aware of what's going on and to monitor and
давление с моей стороны, а что там когда сроки-то сделали.
Do what it takes, but still so that people didn't feel the pressure from my side. There are many aspects to it.
Здесь, кажется, научился сам с собой договариваться.
But I think I learned to...
Мы лучше здесь посмотрим, а не через людей, через пушинг или еще что-то и так далее.
Talk to myself in the right way. So that I could practice the right approach. Well, when I talk about what I do, I think that I give talented people who are much smarter than me an environment to work. So I keep some framework for them.
правда, токсичности, пушинга, там, топ-менеджмента и так далее,
keep the
каких-то соседних
frame so that
то есть как-то я даю им
my
возможность,
people experience less toxicity, less pushing from other teams, and so that they had the opportunity to do what we have been dreaming about and what we agreed, and to make sure that the external world doesn't disrupt their activity and efficiency, and so that only good things and opportunities transpire to them from the outside world. But when someone tries to push them, I try to prevent that. And I also liked Ainur's idea about the ability to withstand the uncertainty. And I think that my role as the leader is that I am the one who withstands all the uncertainty, so that it didn't hit the people, and so that they continued to go with sparkling eyes, and I will manage the uncertainty somehow. At one of the panels, I heard this. I heard this word "shit umbrella." Well, it's difficult to do self-assessment. You should have asked Dennis Baranov about me. No, honestly, I think it's about making people's eyes sparkle. That is my superpower. Okay, Valentin, what about you?
На самом деле, я всем советую. Ну, то есть это простое упражнение.
Well, it's a simple exercise
Образование неплохо срабатывает.
that works quite well for team building.
В двух кругах спрашивали, и мы среди как бы.
And we asked each other, and we did it among the top management.
Ну, там мне роль выделили.
And there the feedback was that I'm a visionary with sparkling eyes that leads people, whom people follow. So my superpower was the ability to convey my idea to others. And then we did it again. We again exchanged with the people who participated in that session, and we wrote about everyone else. And you had a sheet of paper with all the other people's feedback written down for you. And yes, there was openness and love for the team, etc. But perhaps the most frequently emergent thing was that I really look into the essence of things.
Как мне это помогает, на самом деле, мне кажется, это тот инструмент, который больше всего я использую.
And this is the tool that I use most when I work with my guys in one-on-one conversations. When they come to me with a problem, then my default approach is that if a problem is difficult to solve, then it should be solved on a different level. And they don't come with simple things. They come with challenging things. So my idea is that something that the people are struggling with is the consequence of something else. So it is my point to find the reason for that. Okay, thank you. So let me summarize a few ideas. We have talked about a lot of things, and the repetitive themes are freedom and giving space, that a leader should create some environments that would let teams to operate. We spoke about some informal tools, such as a chat with circled videos.
Все важнее для нас. Мне кажется, что много такого сквозного у нас было
про то, что все-таки меняется. Discussed quite a lot that the role of teams is changing.
Мы это называем винфорстащеры.
That we need more resilience. We need more people who would push things forward.
очень частое слово было энергия.
even if they don't know what to
Я
do.
уверена, что от
And
наших гостей восточных
Energy
период
came up
вдохновения
quite
энергия,
often,
поэтому
and I
давайте
hope that you guys
аплодисменты
had a lot of
скажем
energy and
спасибо.
inspiration from our panelists today. So let's have a round of
Спасибо,
applause
что
to
в
them, and let's say
субботу вы
thank
нашли
you
время,
to them
которое
for finding your time
официально
on
предназначено,
Saturday,
чтобы вы наполнялись энергией для
even
следующих
though
побед.
this
Вы
is the
нашли время
official
поделиться
time
с
for
нами
you to
своими заметками,
regenerate your
наблюдениями.
energy. So thank you for finding your time, for sharing your ideas
как работа с командами.
in
Желаем вам
such a
огромных
challenging
успехов,
topic as working with the teams.
лучших
So
талантов
we
в
wish you
ваших
every
командах.
success,
Спасибо
and we
большое.
wish that the best talent became part of your teams. Thank you very much.
У нас сейчас будет с вами
Colleagues, we will now
небольшой технический
Have a break.
путешествовать. Кто-то любит путешествовать. Знаете, вот я человек-план. Я все исследую, все узнаю. Но в путешествии я люблю там двигаться довольно свободно. У меня есть муж, и он дисраптор путешествий, потому что обычно мы куда-то едем по Абхазии, непонятно где, и он говорит: интересно, куда ведет эта дорога направо? И через полчаса мы какой-то бабушке переносим дома стеллаж. Я ненавижу его в этот момент, но потом в моей жизни это создает приключения. И на самом деле это классно, да, постфактум. Подумайте сейчас, кто для вас самый классный друг для путешествий, и буквально за полминутки просто скажите: я Лена, я управляю Инфорс, и мой самый классный друг в путешествиях — это человек легкий на подъем, там, вот какие-то качества. Это может быть и какой-то конкретный человек в том числе. Итак, 6А, подождите. И будет задание. Когда вы закончите ваше обсуждение, вам нужно будет в ваших группах выбрать очень важную роль. У нас на всех сессиях это самая главная роль, и эта роль называется «Человек-молодец». На нее можно самовыдвинуться. Что это за роль? Мы знаем, что ни одна скучная, унылая, в страхе команда ничего классного никогда не решает и не создает. И вообще самые клевые решения придумывают такие ребята на драйве. А самый простой способ создать драйв — это получать много позитивной поддержки. И человек-молодец — это человек, который будет в течение нашей игры всю вашу команду постоянно хвалить. И говорит: ребята, вы огонь. Классная идея, супер вообще предложение. И этих людей может быть 2 или 3, если они захотят. Поэтому после того, как вы все поделитесь, пожалуйста, подумайте, а кто готов стать таким человеком-молодцом или кого вы бы предложили. Итак, 6 минут на знакомство, время пошло. Владимир Салыкин, CPO продуктов Positive Technologies. Пожалуйста, аплодисменты. И как будет строиться наша работа после того, как вы решите кейс, то есть вы открываете кейс, который мы скажем, да, там читайте его, у вас будет возможность уточняющий задать вопрос, если он важен. Да? И у вас будет на первый кейс 20 минут, потом мы начнем сокращать время. В ваших раздатках есть задание, которое нужно на которое нужно ответить, и оно же будет дублироваться на экране. После этого вы выбираете одного человека. Я скажу, когда осталось 5 минут до конца, чтобы вы могли уже как-то сориентироваться. Один человек от команды презентует очень жестко в тайминге 1,5 минуты ваше решение. И мы позволяем нашим коллегам его оценить, и они в категорию приоритизации дают вашей команде 3, 2 или 1 балл. Прокомментируют свои решения. Хорошо? Коллеги, пожалуйста, присаживайтесь. Пока. Итак, все ли готовы? Как я люблю кейс-стадии. Я вообще, когда училась, просто наконец-то поняла, что это самое важное на самом деле, что мы можем делать. Это изучать опыты других компаний, других людей. И первый кейс, который мы с вами решим, это кейс, который прям постоянно мы встречаем в жизни, когда у нас есть технологическое противоречие и человеческое. И дело-то не только в том, что у нас есть вызовы внутри компании, мы решаем какие-то вопросы технологии, но и проблема в том, что сталкиваются еще реальные люди. Итак, 5 минут прочитать кейс. Они есть у вас на... Так, есть ли у нас еще раздаточки? Давайте мы вот Свету и... Прекрасные Света и Маша, давайте аплодисментами, они дадут нам еще листочки. Вот, вы можете... Да, то есть то же самое можно просто прочитать. Но можно прочитать, да, здесь. Я не буду просто устраивать PowerPoint караоке, знаете, сейчас. Вот, я думаю, что все могут прочитать самостоятельно. Угу. Так, первый кейс – битва архитекторов. Код против хаоса. Пока не приступаем к обсуждению, подождите, пока у вас время на ознакомление с кейсом и возможностью задать 1-2 уточняющих вопроса. Так, и я перелистываю на задание. Ваша задача, собственно, спасти проект и разрядить конфликт. Вам нужно разработать, придумать, что будет внутри решения конфликта и как сделать такой успешный переход на микросервисы. Вам нужно будет сказать, в чем вы видите корень конфликта и в чем может быть причина напряжения между Максимом и Еленой. Какие меры вы предлагаете для того, чтобы решить этот конфликт? Как нужно изменить, возможно, процессы? Какие могут быть приоритеты? И кто должен быть ответственен за переход на новую систему аутентификации? 20 минут. Вы, скорее всего, не ответите на все вопросы. Нету такой задачи. Есть задача попробовать ответить на максимальное количество или ответить на те, которые, с вашей, у нас есть просто не очень равномерно, да, там есть больше команды архитектурные, там IT, технологических, есть там больше HR-ные. Это fine. Выбирайте те вопросы, на которые вам нравится отвечать. Вы можете взять ответы из собственного опыта, и это будет супер ценно для вашей команды. Единственное, что я попрошу, у нас 20 минут, лимитируйте сами себя по времени, сколько вы говорите. Если у нас, поднимите руки в командах те, кто считают себя интровертами. Вот кто считает, что интроверты? Посмотрите на своих интровертов. Интроверты говорят первыми. Итак, есть ли вопросы уточняющие? Есть ли у вас какие-то вопросы, которые вот сейчас точно нужно задать? Ну, сейчас, нет, потом мы не задаем, вот сейчас можно задать, а потом, когда вы будете отвечать, если вы найдете какой-то такой спорный вопрос, вы можете сказать, что если вот у компании вот так, то вот так, а если вот так, то вот так. Ну, то есть уже как бы без самого вопроса. Кейсы мы не будем считать количество, ну, то есть не будет соревнования в том, на сколько вопросов вы ответили. А если вы круто ответите на несколько вопросов, это тоже может принести вам победу там, на 2-3. Это вопросы для размышления, на какие из них вы лучше командой сможете ответить. Окей. 20 минут, время пошло. нашу онлайн-аудиторию. Итак, ребята, которые с нами все еще были онлайн, мы с вами прощаемся, вас отпускаем. Спасибо большое, что были с нами во время этих обсуждений. Дальше у нас будет уже игра и команды, поэтому вам большое спасибо. Если получится, обязательно в следующем году приезжайте к нам сюда, в Лужники, смотреть на всю эту потрясающую площадку, которая, и все это мероприятие, которое вокруг происходит. Всем пока-пока. А я возвращаюсь к командам.